this becomes the second argument against Christianity. The first being being evolution. The second is the fact that there is, in fact, an alien, whom she calls a demon originally, in order to explain away how there could be an alien life form. And then he does sort of a mind meld on her where he transfers all of his vast knowledge into her. And after seeing his knowledge, she realizes that everything she's ever believed is a lie. And that's when she deconverts. And I'd like to talk about that in a minute. But I'd like to first address the three arguments that are brought. And I think those are the only three arguments in the film. The first being evolution, which we've addressed. The second being alien life. Now, we've discussed this on an earlier podcast several years ago, but this is an argument that happens every once in a while, that if there are alien life forms, then God does not exist. It's just this leap from aliens, therefore no God.
Right, and this movie makes it very clear that is the argument for this film anyway, and that, boom, aliens, therefore no God.
Yeah. Do you get how that argument works?
I've thought through this a number of times, and I think it probably largely stems from people like Dawkins, who proponent that, the best explanation they can come up with for life on this planet is that it was seeded here somehow by an either intelligent or non-intelligent other species of some kind from somewhere else out in the universe that, either had more time to evolve or, meteor with some organic life crashed into the planet, because most of the theories for abiogenesis just don't hold up very well, especially when you look at the statistics and the probability of that happening with those very early cells, that there aren't good experiments to show us that this can actually happen. So, with that being said, I think that the reason this is held to so tightly is people think that, okay, if we find there's somebody else out there in the universe, then surely that's how life got here on this planet. And I think it's leading to a stronger version of that argument versus therefore there's no God. Now, there's some more I'll go into, but I think that answers at least the question as to where it kind of came from.
Well, you said there's more to go into. I'd like to give my take on the argument, but before I do, did you want to finish up your thought?
Well, I was just going to go into a Christian explanation on the other side. So, I'd like to hear your take before we go down that road of kind of the answer to this issue, if you will.
All right. So the Christian kind of take on the sort of broader schema, the meta-narrative of Scripture, is that God creates the universe. And then he has a special creation in man and woman, in which he creates them in his image. And they kick off this sort of human race. And then there's the sin and the fall affects the entire universe. So that all of creation groans, etc., because of the sin of human beings. And thereafter, there's this sort of long narrative which results in God becoming man, becoming a human being, this sort of special creation of God. And he, becomes human. He dies, he resurrects, and he ascends to heaven, where he sits on the right hand of God as a human being, as a particular species of life. And then, eventually there's the new heavens and the new earth, etc. And so this is a very human-centric sort of narrative. And so the struggle is, if we find intelligent life which is equal to us in all other aspects in terms of moral agency and reason and essentially they're different looking versions of us. You know, they have all of the same aspects of human beings in the ways that count, in their ability to reason and use logic and create technology and exercise moral thinking. Uh, and so at that point, humanity loses its special status. And it also demonstrates that evolution does in fact work, because there is the creation of these not the creation, but the evolution of other life forms on other planets, showing that evolution is a successful form. So that you've got that, reduction of the specialness of human beings in the universe, and then you've got the argument for evolution. And then, of course, there's the C.S. Lewis kind of question of, well, would God have to incarnate on every planet as every different life form and do his sort of redemptive act over again because they're not human? They're a different life form type thing. So, the argument essentially evolves around or revolves around this idea that on the Christian narrative, humans are a special creation, and they're made in the image of God. And, once they lose their specialness, that narrative kind of plummets. So do you get that argument?
Yeah, that's more sophisticated than what I usually hear, though. But right. I get it. And I think there are a couple reasonable explanations. I don't think anyone is going to satisfy someone who's holding to this to the extent that, this is where they're kind of grounding things. They're going to find ways around it. But I think that particularly there's a couple problems with that argument, in that, one, you have the question of the image of God. So either these species are made in an image of God somehow, and they have the redemptive act paid for by Jesus in the form here or some other form. To speculate that far out is to really speculate beyond the knowledge we have right now. Is it a question that may come up? Sure. But it's certainly so much speculation. It's hard to even go into, because we don't know what the situation would be if we found life on another planet. In most situations, that's probably going to be, unintelligent life versus intelligent life. Even from an evolutionary perspective, if you consider that, then in most of the scenarios where we're going to discover life, it's probably unlikely that it developed to the point of being intelligent life. So go ahead.
I would think that if we were to find life on another planet, an alien creature which looks different than us, and yet it communicated in the way we do, it reasoned in the way we do, and it perceived morality in the way we do, that would be evidence for God, because it follows this sort of universality of reason and morality, in which which are grounded in the sort of ontological, abstract, above just material universe. I would say that, if you were going to use them as evidence against God, it would have to be in a way that they operated completely different from us. They were sophisticated in some way, similar to us. Well, sophisticated, yeah, but they didn't think like us. They didn't operate like us. They didn't have the same morality. That would be more convincing to me than if we went and they thought, they were other versions of us. Because, that would seem, well, that's evidence for a commonality of not biology, but rather logic, morality, reason, those things which we say are grounded in God's nature.
Right. No, absolutely. And then, we would have no reason in that scenario to doubt that, Jesus's sacrifice here wasn't part of the grand plan for them to reach out to us or, make communication in that way so that they can receive that salvation as well, especially if they have that imago Dei, the image of God that we do, because we don't believe that's, just being a person. It is something deeper than that. So
I don't find that to be a particular challenge, because the Christian doctrine allows for intelligent moral agents that exist in the universe besides human beings
Right.
and aren't part of that specific redemptive story. They have a different relationship with God. You know, they're called angels.
Mhm.
And other, there's allusions to other heavenly beings. But the point is that it is possible, it's already built into Christian doctrine that there are intelligent moral agents which aren't part of that particular redemptive story and yet have a relationship with God and operate in an intelligent moral way. And so, if we were to run into aliens, there's no reason to assume that they have to play into our particular redemptive story. They could have a different relationship with God, just like all the other moral agents that exist in the universe besides humans.
Right. And, you know, given that, and this is going to go down a road that may turn some people off, but, and they parody this in the movie by her claim that he's a demon immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of looking at evidence, when we sit down and look at evidence, there are a certain number of residual UFO encounters. So by that, I mean, when we look at all the UFO sightings that we see, most of them can be explained by something. So there was one back from, I think, the Apollo 11 mission that just this week I read up on, and what looked like a saucer UFO was actually one of the lights from the module that had broken off. So looks like a saucer floating through the air. People have claimed it's a UFO for years. Well, guess what? We have an explanation for that now. So if we took all the scenarios that were either hoaxes, had reasonable explanations, the ones that are clearly from unreliable sources of some kind, if we took all those, threw them out, we'd still have this residual. So there are some situations that just we don't have a good explanation for what these UFOs in these particular encounters are. And many of them are accompanied by what people would describe as abduction experiences. I have a hard time buying into most of them, but some of them, people have experienced something. Whether that's something that's called deep psychological trauma that they're not actually able to deal with logically, I don't know. But if we took the residual UFOs, threw them out, or keep the residual UFOs, throw out all the rest, do the same thing with alien encounters. Throw out the unreliable ones, keep the ones that are, we at least have reason to question them and say something weird happened here. There's a lot of commonalities there. And a lot of those commonalities point to beings that are sending a different message of salvation in some way. They discredit the Christian account so much. And interestingly enough, that seems to be the only belief they really attack. And in many of these cases, people who have called on Jesus's name have had these kind of things stop. Now, again, there are some reliable cases of this out there. I'm not saying that you should immediately buy into this, but while the movie parodies the fact that she immediately jumps up and says this alien's a demon, when you dig deeper, there's some legitimate reasons that Christians actually consider UFO and alien activity to be demonic. And one of those, from a scientific perspective, is that, a lot of the activity seen in these residual UFOs is stuff that can't be accredited for by physics. And not to mention the fact that, given the laws of physics, we just don't see that faster than light speed travel is really something that is easy to pull off, even if there were another intelligent life. So chances are, if there is anything that's occurring in these encounters, it's something local. And given what we know about these handful of things that are left, and by handful I mean we're still talking there's hundreds of encounters left over, but the case for alien and UFO activity being demonic in some way, shape, or form is not quite what it's portrayed at in the movie either.
I'm not a big fan of jumping to the demon explanation for things.
And I'm right there with you. I think it's a possible explanation. It's not necessarily the one that I would go to right away, though. Probably the last thing I would go to on my list.
All right. Yeah, like the devil buried dinosaur fossils to
Right,
deceive us
exactly.
about the age of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's. I think people are a little too quick to jump to the devil and demon explanation for things, and I would avoid it unless it was unavoidable in
Mm-hmm.
some way.